Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for joining us for this panel about transforming energy. Well, we all know that renewable energy is expected to increase about 8% in 2022, reaching about 320 gigawatts. And we've all also read the news about this region's net zero targets. Saudi Arabia has one, UAE has one, Oman recently announced one. But we are facing an energy crisis, and we keep hearing from officials, especially from this region, that the fast pace of the energy transformation has led us to this point where we're lagging behind an upstream investment that could fulfill the current energy needs. I'm joined by a fantastic panel today. We're hoping to shed some light on what are the viable options for transition in this region, what makes sense economically, and touching a little bit on the geopolitics. So if you allow me to introduce my panelists here. Next to me is Mr. Vineet Mittal, Chairman of Avaada Group. Mr. John Raymond, the founder and of the Energy and Minerals Group. We have Mr. Hamad Al-Rashidi, Senior Vice President of Sustainability, Safety, Innovation at Ma'aden. Welcome. And we have Mr. Kerry Adler, President and CEO of SkyPower Group. Welcome. Mr. Cyrus Hiramanek, Senior Managing Director of Klein and Company. Welcome. And Mr. Imtiaz Mahtab, Founding Partner of Hydeal. Welcome. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me. And I'll start off here by asking, let's talk a little bit about how this balance could happen between an energy transition, but at the same time trying to meet the demand that we have today, which obviously includes a hydrocarbon component.
So as we have been hearing here for past 1.5 days, we need all the sources of energy. And today, what green energy offers the world is a substitute for oil in the forms of hydrogen. Hydrogen has been around for hundreds of years, but first time it has become commercially viable to produce large amount of hydrogen using green technology in a very scalable way. And one of the beauty of hydrogen is not only that when you burn it, it makes water and it's good for the nature and environment. The advantage is that it's available in abundance everywhere. So most of the world is blessed by sun and wind, and what it needs as a raw material is the water, and split the water into hydrogen and oxygen. So it kind of creates a level playing field across the geography. And the need today is that to make hydrogen technology accessible to each and every country. Like Saudi is doing a big project in NEOM. They have decided to do one of the world's largest project, which should go into construction later this year. Similarly, India has announced a very ambitious policy. Europe is looking at importing 10 million tons of hydrogen, equivalent to 50 million tons of green ammonia by 2030. Taiwan is looking at the same. You are looking at Japan and Korea, which were mainly dependent on import. They all are looking the same. The advantage with the green ammonia, green methanol, and hydrogen is it's not only environmental friendly, but you can fix the price for 10 to 20 years. Because the raw material for it is water, which is very small quantity, and it's a capex model, not an opex model like hydrocarbon. So once you have done the capex, your cost is frozen, and opex is very limited. So it's a game changer in that sense, and I'm looking forward to the days when you come here, the cars are driven by hydrogen, your trucks are driven by hydrogen, and now several companies have proven at a scale, like Toyota has a car, hydrogen car, which recently launched in India. in single fill, you can drive 500 kilometers. It currently costs 4 cents per kilometer. And if you compare it with the price of petrol in India, it's at US $1. And 1 liter takes you to 10 kilometer. So that means 10 cents. So even today at $4, hydrogen is cheaper than conventional oil. So
that makes sense, yeah, economically. I just wanted to give John a chance here to chip in with something that, I mean, yesterday during the panel of the Saudi energy minister, he was really concerned about the way that US, didn't name the US directly, but just the stocks withdrawal, the current situation where we have where spare capacity is very tight, and we're in an environment where we need to invest in upstream. From the US perspective, John, could you let us know how they're balancing between encouraging shale producers versus moving towards a transition?
Sure. A couple of comments. One, thank you for the invitation. It's nice to be here. And I want to dovetail on what was just said as it relates to the energy, quote unquote, transition. We think about it very differently. We think about it as an energy expansion because our view of it is, and it's consistent with what was just said, we need all of the above sources as we move forward into the future. This notion that you're going to transition away from one into another is a very dangerous conversation. And if you have to look no further than the country of Germany at this point to understand that. And so we don't look at this as transitioning off of one input to another. We look at it as truly expanding. It's an energy expansion into all sorts of other sources. And so to do that, you need a lot of additional commodities. And we call them the enabling green commodities. Different people call them different things. But it's, we all know what we're talking about. It's the lithiums, the cobalts, the nickels, the rare earths, the PGMs, the coppers of the world, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's something that we're very focused on. Now that, and to get to your question specifically, so it's the green commodities, but it is not at the exclusion of hydrocarbons. Mm-hmm. To the contrary, there still has to be significant capital formation and investment in the basic hydrocarbons, because you can run the simple math out to the year 2050, energy intensity, population growth, use whatever numbers you choose, you're still consuming at a minimum 100 million barrels a day of oil. It is an inescapable fact that you're never going to get away from hydrocarbons, at least not for the next 30 to 40 years. And so do we need to build additional sources on top of that? Absolutely. Do we need the green enabling commodities to do it? Absolutely. But we also need significant capital formation and investment in the underlying depleting resource today. And that's the challenge that we have in the United States, is the regulatory environment simply isn't conducive to the capital formation needs to continue to invest in a shale business in the United States of America that declines at 30 to 35% a year, okay? And over here, for example, in the kingdom, your oil business probably declines 1 or 2% a year. It's got a very shallow decline rate to it. In the United States of America, the shale plays decline at 30 to 35% a year. The first year of an oil well declines at 80%. And so the capital that's needed to keep that going is enormous, and that is where the pinch point is.
Do policymakers understand this, John?
No.
Thank you. Next, we want to hear a little bit from Saudi Arabia and the experience of Ma'aden from Mr. Hamad. Can you just tell us, now the kingdom has a net zero target by 2060. What is Ma'aden's role in reaching this target?
Thank you very much. First of all, Joe, I just want to put a bit of context here. Last year, Ma'aden, on one of its portfolio, the fertilizer, produced around 6 million tons of phosphate, and that contributed to food security of about 800 million to 1 billion of the global population. So having said that, that makes how we approach our carbon neutrality and transitioning to renewable so important, because the pressure and the responsibility that is put on the producers to play their major part in the globe and the global food security. So Ma'aden last year announced its strategy, 2040 strategy, and that's with the ambition to reach to the carbon neutrality by 2050. Having said that, it's very important that we secure our current needs of our operation, our demand that will support our growth, but also drive on our green agenda that we will reach by 2050 to carbon neutrality. We collaborate with stakeholders, we collaborate with ministries and government bodies, and we tap into the major initiative of Saudi Arabia, part of the 2030 vision, be it the renewable, be it the other diversification of economy, but also we partner with our technologists and with technology provider and with the industry leaders. So it's the whole ecosystem that we look into it so that this is the business, how we sustain our business, meet our obligation globally, at the same time drive our green agenda in the next year to come. We have flagships, we support renewables, and this is where we have signed several agreements and MOUs with different partners that will make our green agenda journey more practical and achievable. We have set our milestones, our middle term milestones, and we are driving towards that.
Thank you for that update. And it looks like it's something that's moving forward and it's not just talk. So it's great to get that update.
Absolutely. Actually, today we have been awarded amongst the 3 top winners of the auction of carbon credits. So we are really driving our agenda.
Congratulations.
And we are
for that.
also
Congratulations. Okay, Mr. Cyrus, I wanted to ask about the most viable options. I meet with, as a journalist, we meet with many people, and especially in the investment field, and they ask which option in the renewable sector is the most profitable. Of course, it depends on geography, but could you say something specific to this region? What makes sense?
So I think first we need to understand what is required in terms of investment globally to get to this transformation. So we require approximately $300 trillion by 2050. To just give you that number, that is $10 trillion a year.
So we require capital.
Capital, $10 trillion.
Yeah.
Just
capital with a capital C.
Yes, $10 trillion. And if we break down that $10 trillion, that has to go both into conventional and unconventional form. And if you think about this region is rich with natural resources, both renewable and non-renewable. So you have oil and gas, and you're blessed with wind and solar. Mm-hmm. But as we think about profitability of the renewable sector, that's still a question mark. Because if you think about why don't we have renewable energy today, we don't have a lot of renewable energy today because from a private sector perspective, it's still not commercially viable. There's a lot of capital investment and the returns are not there. So we need policymakers to really understand that. And if we take a step back and we talk about this energy transformation, we require, according to a McKinsey estimate, 3 times more electricity globally by 2050 that we produce today. So as my colleague mentioned, we need all forms of energy. Even though we get to 80% renewable by 2050, but we'll need oil, gas, coal, and all fossil fuels, because fossil fuels have been the reason why we have seen the world transform from the 1800s to where we have today.
Absolutely. Imtiaz, I'd like to add a little bit on that. I know that you've been working with sovereign wealth funds, especially from this region here. Could you tell us what areas they're investing in? And again, what makes sense from a financial perspective?
So, I think, first of all, very pleased to be here. On advisory role, I've worked with a couple of sovereign funds. But I agree with all the very credible comments that we have heard, though I have a little bit of different opinions in terms of the profitability, in terms of where the market is heading. So just to give you very quickly a global context today. So of course, if we look at the net zero target by 2050, today roughly the greenhouse gas emission is, including everything, is about 53 gigaton, 37 of which is CO2. with all the technology that we have, that can only address 2/3 to keep 1.5 degree. So the other 1/3 has to come from transformation of energy, which is green hydrogen, carbon capture, all those things has to come in. So those will drive to get to the 1.5 degree for those 1/3 of reduction. That's where you have to put most of the money, 70% of the capital, whatever the number you mentioned. I have different figures, but let's not get bogged down with the figures. That's where we have to go in. Now, going backward, okay, then how do we create profitability? So there are really two things that's going to drive it. One is the demand side. If you look at today, SEC is working on TCFD, the implementation, task force related to climate disclosure. Many companies will have to, for the risk assessment, have to disclose their risk carbon. Ma'aden is doing a fantastic job, but that many companies have to do that. Ma'aden is doing it because it's its own strategic vision, but company have to do it. So steel sector, hard to abate sector, which is, you talked about ArcelorMittal and many other sectors, they have to change their processes to be able to consume the renewable energy sort of product to be able to cut the emission. Mm-hmm. So that means that's one way to drive the transformation of energy is going to be the one where the value will be created. And the other side of it will be the input provider, means mining sector. You know, if you look at the art material that goes into different type of, in the making of those things, is going to also generate enough revenue. So when I talk about that renewable energy is not, making money, but I don't know how do you value it, but if you look at today the Adani group, which has announced lots of different projects as one of the probably highest market cap in the world, I'm sure if Ma'aden go to the market today with all the great stuff they're doing, it will be one of the most valuable company because the fundamental is there. So to me, as an investors, what I would recommend is to look towards the transformation of energy, which is basically from the point of views, which is hard to abate sectors, to the low carbon fuel, hydrogen, ammonia, whatever you call it. That's one area. The other area is, as we talked about, the art material that's going to feed the renewable energy in the making. So these are the two areas that you can have, above average. You can beat the weight of cost of capital. So,
Kerry, I didn't skip you, but you wanted to go last. So I'm going to circle round to the first question that I had and ask you again, how could we balance between the energy needs we need today, which obviously need a big component of hydrocarbons, versus transitioning into cleaner energy?
It's a very loaded question.
Sorry.
So, just with all due respect, I'm going to be the one that's going to disagree with most of what I've heard today.
Go ahead. We love disagreements.
And this is with all due respect. And the two gentlemen on the end I've known 22 years and 10 years. I went into solar in 2003 after building Microsoft's back office, and actually Vineet was one of my partners in India. Having a vision of what the future looks like starts with looking at what the past looks like and asking if that's what we want as our future for our children, your grandchildren. There's so many different ways we can attack the problem. The one thing we do know and recognize is there is a worldwide problem. And the brightest minds that I know from MIT and abroad give about a 6% chance that we can actually arrest climate change. 6%. So it's now not worried about how we're going to address it. We got to figure out how to mitigate. So what are the solutions? This green hydrogen that I hear about, I'm Canadian, so I mean, we believe in everything you want. Green, blue, pink, gray, whatever color you want. We're fine with it. But let's stop and think about something for a second. How are we going to power those electrolyzers? Well, simultaneously moving to 30% electric cars when the grids can't even support the load and the population per capita utilization of energy. California is going through brownouts. South Africa is at stage 5, stage 6. I got to tell you, the most important factor in any manufacturing or business process is people and power. And normally it's people that are more expensive input. Now it's power. So green hydrogen is a beautiful idea in a world where we're not facing imminent climate crisis that's destroying our economies and destroying the workplace. And if we had a sufficient amount of energy to put power in the homes and make sure every child, every woman, every family had basic electricity for medical care, childbirth. No one really stops to think that 750 million people on the continent of Africa by 2050 are forecasted to not have power. Most kids will never have a chance of an education because they won't even have a chance to read, because their day's over when the sun sets. And 73% of women during their lifetime on the continent are assaulted because they have to run home after dark. So we live in a world where there's a lot of inequalities, and I think it's our responsibility to do something better. That's why we chose solar. So I fundamentally disagree with you that solar is not profitable. We're in 36 countries. We just signed close to $15 billion of new contracts. We insure the sun around the world. We insure the panels. And when I say we insure the sun, if it doesn't shine, we get paid. Our projects are 18, 20% levered, pre-tax returns minimum. And I don't know about any hotel owners here, but we didn't lose a dime during COVID. So power is power. Power is power. And the transition is necessary, whether we like it or not. Oil is going to be around for specialty chemicals and for clothing, what we wear. The most important thing about power and electricity is the necessity to make sure the lights stay on and we acclimate ourselves to the continued growth of society and humanity. Technology advancements require us to look at other forms of energy, and we're going to be faced with various forms of energy. But I got to tell you something. This is a boondoggle, all these tens of billions of dollars going into hydrogen. You got to transport it. You got to be able to deliver it. How are we going to use hydrogen in countries like Zimbabwe or Somaliland? Well, that's not even a country yet, but Kenya, throughout the continent of Africa. They don't even have transmission lines. We're going to deliver it in drones, right? That's what you got to think of. We got to think of how we're going to solve the problem today, and then worry about maybe ways that we can do it more efficiently. But I got to tell you, in this country, where we're sitting here today, 1 unit of electricity, which we measure in kilowatt hours, the cost is 1.1 cents to generate. There's nothing in the world that beats that, and nothing that creates as many jobs as that. So this is about jobs, this is about education, this is about healthcare, and it's about the future of humanity. And that's why power is power.
Strong statements.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that
Sure.
I don't disagree with you. I'd said renewables as a whole category, not just solar, but just to also clarify, you have to also think about energy density. While solar is great, it's green, but in most countries like Germany, the efficiency is only 12%. You can only get sun only shines X%, and you need to have storage, because you can have solar, but if you don't have storage, you'll have electricity for half a day.
Is some electricity better than not? Switzerland pays 35 euros a kilowatt hour today. I could deliver solar at 9 cents.
No, I don't disagree with you, but I think what we need is cheap power and energy security.
How about just power?
No, I love the side discussion. I'll come to that. And on the point of storage, Vineet, we're going to discuss this further, but maybe this is a question you could also take a stab at. But the idea of a country being energy independent is very attractive. But could that really be the case? Could a country be energy independent and not need any materials from outside? Vineet, we spoke about this before the panel started. They often, I'm the chief OPEC correspondent for Energy Intelligence Group. They blame OPEC for everything related to oil. But for the storage we're talking about, we need metals that come from places like China, from South America, and so on. Could that be the new cartel that controls energy in the future?
I think for every challenge, there is a solution. And there are countries which are blessed with certain minerals and natural resources. And that's why the world is codependent on each other. I think in sense of true self-reliant world or self-reliant country, I hope no one becomes, because it's the dependence on each other which makes us saner, and we all love to live in harmony. But the technologies, if you take it from the technical angle, there are technologies which are becoming substitute. So there is nothing which is invincible. Even iridium, palladium, and many rare earth matter, which are used for electrolyzer, are currently scientist community across the world are working on finding the substitute for the same. We used to have, we are a large solar, wind, and green molecule company. We were facing a challenge that a large countries stopped supplying us solar panel during COVID, we changed our business model. Now we are a sand to molecule company. So you build the ability to convert sand into solar panel, and that's possible to develop across the world. But today, because world in some form is like a small village as well, where the best person is getting rewarded. Due to supply chain, I think some of the negativity have come. But I am looking at this Indian concept where we say that Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which means the world is a single family. And the need in this world today is, after the Ukraine war, is more to be codependent so we don't mess with each other's happiness and build a world which is more sustainable, reliable, and more harmonious to live in.
I love the message of peace. I hope we can reach that point. John, I want to ask you again about, I mean, we saw the US's furious response at OPEC, but back to my question.
I don't read the newspaper, so I don't really know what they said.
It's a good thing. Don't. Again, could China and South America and the having control over these resources, could they be trusted in continuously supplying them for storage? Could you remove geopolitics basically from the energy equation?
And you're talking about on the green commodities, for example. Yeah, the rare earths and the lithiums of the world. Yeah, I think, look, the Chinese are 10 years ahead of everybody else. They looked out 10 years ago through the windshield, so to speak, and realized that this was the opportunity, and they went out and cornered the market in the resources. I can't fault them for doing it. They were very visionary, and to their credit, they did it. I think now the rest of the world has realized what they've done, and they're now trying to disintermediate those supply chains out of China to ensure the security that they need for the commodities that their countries need. And so the idea that you have become and want to remain dependent upon whether it's China or any other country is just incredibly naive. You've got to create the channel, and you've got to secure your own needs. And I think, the comment that I would make in the middle of this is we can talk about whatever form of energy you want, including all the renewables. None of it happens without steel, okay? And you're not going to manufacture steel without iron ore, and you're not going to manufacture green steel without high-quality iron ore. That will become one of the world's greatest pinch points in the course of the next 5 to 10 years.
That makes sense. Hamad, could you just answer the question, but with regards to trade now, how does geopolitics impact the trade of energy?
I think it's unlike the oil economy, the renewable energy is going to be decentralized. It works on geographies and the integration within a geography. Just an example, if you have renewable power in Asia, can you transfer it to North America with the current technologies and current infrastructure? So I think the geopolitics will play a major role, the supply chain, but also the technology, I believe, is going to play an even bigger role in the future in developing enablers for this energy to be even expanded beyond a geography. For example, in Northern Europe, it's a wind. So that one form, that's only within that area. So you can transfer it through power lines. But is these infrastructure sufficient? Are they robust enough that sustainability of supply of energy cannot be disturbed among the whole bigger region? So I think oil economy is more robust for the past probably 100 years or so, but we see geopolitics playing, sometimes hiccups in supply, and the wars in Europe is a clear demonstration of that. However, I think when it comes to a renewable trade, it's going to be a totally different ball game, except for a regional, very central area that is completely interconnected, and investment is being done today so that in the future, in 20 years' time, there can be a hub of energy market or energy trade within that area.
Thank you. Cyrus, Do you want to go next, Kerry, or you were still doing this sequence? Okay, Cyrus, I wanted to ask you about the current environment. We're facing uncertainty on so many levels. You're seeing threats of a looming recession in 2023, inflation. We heard from top bankers earlier in the day and yesterday talking about this possibility of a recession globally. How does that impact the transition?
I think in the short term, everybody knows rates are rising. So if rates are rising, capital becomes more expensive. But we can't think about this transformation in a 2-year period or a 3-year period. We have to look beyond the 20 or 30-year period. And the world needs to work together. And I agree that with my colleague from Madan here that, yes, power markets can be local, but energy markets will still be global. And I agree with my other colleague is we need raw materials to deliver that energy. And without natural resources, we can't have an energy transformation or transition, however you want to address it. Because even if you produce solar panels, you need copper for the transmission lines. That's a clear commodity. You need a tower, you need steel for that. So basic raw materials are the essence of the energy ecosystem, and we require it. We need oil and gas for chemicals that we require for processes. So it's an interdependent world, and I don't think the interdependence is going to reduce from that perspective. Things may change, your seaborne trading may change, but I think global connectivity will still remain. And my colleague at Madan, touched upon an important point of technology. I think it's going to be the technology that is going to enable this transformation, whether it be in any form of renewable and in conventional fossil fuel energy to reduce greenhouse gases.
Imtiaz, I'm going to ask you the same question. How does the current environment really impact the pace of the transition?
Very favorably, actually, if you look at it. U.S. announced IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, close to $468 billion something. It's $500 billion. Mostly focusing on creating a robust local supply chain. If you look at bringing back semiconductor sectors, investing in renewables, investing in local content development, which is not far from what Saudi is doing with Vision 2030, which is really disintegrating over-reliance on one country. I don't think it's China or not China, that's irrelevant. You can't have all the supply chain located in one location. So I think that realization post-COVID has, fast-tracked many countries' realization that you need to have multiple pockets of, I would say, center of excellence in providing raw materials. So I think this is very good. Country will collaborate. That's also another part of it. Yes, there is in the short term, there is some pinch of, you look, U.S. Central Bank were lending at 1%. Now it's 4.25%. But we also know that, these are long-term projects. So you can refinance those things. So I don't think that's going to play a major role in the future. But last but not least, I want to just clarify one point in terms of, because you are in Saudi, so maybe I'll just give you an example of Saudi as how they see it, at least from my perspective, being here for a dozen plus years. So what I see it is that, if you look at Saudi in the many, many years ago, obviously they were over-reliant on oil. Today, oil is at very high level. It has a lot of windfill. But, they continue to move towards localization and industrialization to support the narrative of energy while, of course, playing with the other renewable energy source as well. So that's very important. If you look at hydrogen, a lot of people talk about it, and I agree with Kerry. If you look at, for the mobility sector, the hydrogen will not make sense today because it's not cost competitive. But if you have, directly sending hydrogen to decarbonize the industries, steel manufacturing, that would make sense. So there will be a pocket of places it will make sense. It will not make sense everywhere. 1 million ton. Today, the market of hydrogen worldwide is 100 million ton. 1 million ton will require 15 gigawatt of solar power. So you can understand all those things will drive the requirement. And obviously, another point that was mentioned before, the grid. Grid is very important because today a lot of people are focusing on mining, generation, but there is a capacity to be built in the grid, and this is missing today. So investors, those who are, I know NL is setting up a fund that is going to focus on grid development, and they're going to have a killing return. So those are the areas that we're going to create. And so if you look at Saudi's 2030 vision, having a robust upstream mining sector, having a renewable energy setup, because Kerry mentioned one sense absolutely right, transforming those cheap energy to produce low-cost fuel, which is hydrogen, converting it to ammonia. So these are the kind of thing countries should be doing more and more, and we see US is doing that.
Yeah,
so I think it's overall very positive.
Moving in parallel. Kerry, I'm interested to hear your views on, I mean, you spoke a lot about the advantages of solar power, and the sun shines in many countries, including this region. Why hasn't it picked up in this region faster than...
You're kidding me.
Go on.
What lubricates the world and makes it go around? Look, if you look in the 1950s, early 60s, and you took a jet from Paris to New York, it took you 6 hours and 23 minutes. Fast forward, 2022, that same jet, 6 hours, 22 minutes. Why? Did we lose almost a century? Oil is a byproduct. This is what this region has. Where I come from, Canada, I mean, they've discovered bitumen, in the last 20 years on property my family owned. And then they realize they have to spend $70 a barrel to extract the sand from the oil and actually make it worthwhile. And then they got to figure out how to pipe it down to some water body to move it to some other country that needs it. Look, when I was advising Ban Ki-moon when he was SG, there were really three pillars that we looked at. And sitting back years later now, they're right. Number one is oil, fuel. We're sitting in the wealthiest, albeit wealthiest country in the world as it relates to reserves. Maybe Abu Dhabi's in there. I won't guess which is more or less. Then you look at water. Largest water bodies, drinking water in the world, I used to think was Canada. It's actually Brazil. So Brazil and Canada got the water. And then the components that are required, the rare earth materials, and yes, Chinese are very smart, as were the Russians, and they seize most of it or have control over most of it. 70%, approximately 70% of the cobalt in the world, which is necessary for every battery from your cell phone to your computers to your car, requires cobalt. 70% plus sits between the DRC and Zambia. Don't ask me why, but that's where it is. And today it's mined out of the ground by young kids, and DRC's doing a lot better on their human rights. But without those three things, I mean, look, Biden could come out with another bill, printing money. Printing a $100 bill is the same price as printing a dollar bill. The macroeconomic situation in the world today is we are all learning less. Even on a purchasing power parity basis, we are in a world of hurt. Are we in a recession? We're in a very deep recession. People don't want to say it. They don't want to scare people. So the economics of solar are simple. What is the lowest cost of generating energy over the life of an asset? You take a solar park, you build it, one-time cost. It's got an insured warranty, 35 years. You insure the sun. It's just cables, wires, and steel. Although if you gave me an idea, maybe we'll look at doing PVC to keep our oil friends happy. But it's steel, it's cables, and it's silicon, which is naturally occurring. You got a price of power for 35 years. You can't hedge oil or gas. And depending where you are in the world, in some places in Africa, they're paying 6 cents for solar. And in this part of the world, they're paying about a penny for solar. You take even oil today, based on $94 barrel oil, it's roughly about 23 cents just for the oil before you run it through a generator, which has a theoretical maximum, say, of 44% Imtiaz, is that right? So it's costing you about 30 cents a kilowatt hour. The problem is that the people who actually grab the oil out of the ground, they look at the cost to extract it, $6, $7, $8, and what they're missing is the avoided cost, meaning what they could have sold it for, taken that money and repurposed it to something else. So there is no debate if you look at solar, coal, nuclear, hydro, and it's debatable whether it's renewable or not, even wind. The single lowest cost of energy generation today is solar. If we were smart enough, We'd send a rocket up to the moon, we'd strip mine the moon, take helium-3, a room half the size of this pavilion would be enough, helium-3, that could create enough energy to power the entire GCC for a year. Instead, we're going to Mars and exploring other planets. There are other avenues, but right now what we have is blessed with the sun, blessed with oil, blessed with wind, unfortunately coal, and we've got some intelligence behind nuclear, but nuclear is not going to bring power to the poorest people in the world. And that's where we all need to focus.
Since we have so much expertise on this panel, we're running out of time, but I want to give 10 seconds each to each of you to think very quickly. If you had one piece of advice to policymakers, what would you give them in order to resolve the energy crisis that we're facing today? Vineet, very quickly, please.
Make electrolyzer technology free for the world to copy and produce at the cheapest cost.
John.
Base your decisions on science, not ideology.
Hamad.
I think investing in good technology will make it.
Base your decisions on mathematics and economics. Invest with me in solar.
Cyrus.
I think the world needs to work together, not apart, to make things happen.
Imtiaz.
Carbon credit. Value the carbon and tax it.
Which happened
For
today.
the polluter. Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.